do we sympathize with her after her tragic loss as we witness her go through every stage of grief? Absolutely. But even taking all that into account, it doesn't negate the fact that Devi can be a real self-centered jerk. So why aren't we entirely put off by this character and her behavior? Because Devi Never Have I Ever, a very popular Netflix teen drama series centered around the life of an Indian American teenager as she struggles to navigate high school and adolescence as well as grieve the death of her father who recently passed. Honestly, writing-wise, there's so many things to unpack regarding this show. The good, the bad, and the great, and we'll get to those videos in time. But today I want to discuss what I believe is one of the main seller points of this show, and particularly its main character, Devi Vishwakumar, the unlikable protagonist done right. Obviously, just like real people, fictional characters should have flaws. This makes them realistic and intriguing, and these flaws enrich your story. But sometimes in our attempt to tell a good tale, we go overboard and give our character too many flaws, or a flaw that is displayed a bit too often. This can push your character a bit too close towards that unlikable area, or right there in it. Now, if you've watched this show, you're well aware that Devi is a severely flawed character, to the point where it's almost unbearable at times. As we watch this story unfold, we witness Devi seemingly make the worst possible decision every single time. As we yell at our screens and roll our eyes and continuously spew insults and expletives in her direction. Or maybe that's just me. I mean, the girl's pretty awful to say the least. Remember when she ditched her friends when Eleanor was having a hard time because Paxton texted her that he needed her? Her best friends, the biggest and most reliable support system in her life. And I remember when she finally got a boyfriend and then she chooses to two-time him just so she can date the popular guy she's been lusting after for so long? Or how about the time her jealousy towards the new girl Anicia causes Devi to accidentally start a rumor about her, which happens to be a dark truth from Anicia's past, which eventually spreads across the school. Knowing full well she did it, instead of owning up to it, she chooses to lead everyone on a wild goose chase and pretends to be an innocent bystander looking to avenge her friend by assisting in tracking down the culprit. We all know I could go on and on. But the point is, Devi comes off as very selfish, inconsiderate, bratty, etc, a majority of the time. It's frustrating, it's irritating, it's infuriating, and it works. But why does it work? Is she interesting? Yes. Is she entertaining? Yes. Do these negative traits make her character very realistic? Yes. And do we sympathize with her after her tragic loss as we witness her go through every stage of grief? Absolutely. But even taking all that into account, it doesn't negate the fact that Devi can be a real self-centered jerk. So why aren't we entirely put off by this character and her behavior? Because Devi gets what she deserves. There's a very balanced cause and effect that takes place throughout the show. Devi is constantly punished for her terrible actions, and the writers make it a point to make sure she doesn't get to glide through every obstacle simply because she is the lead or a very obvious writer's favorite. That's a whole other video. Even when the writers are trying to get us to sympathize with Devi missing her father or struggling to emotionally process things, they still make it very clear they don't condone Devi's antics. They know that we as viewers obviously know what it's like to deal with all the hardships that life can bring about, but that doesn't give us the right to be a jerk to everyone all the time. It's okay for your protagonist to frustrate and even infuriate your audience at times with their bad choices. This is a part of the emotional ride a good story should take us on. However, these should be considered punishable offenses. If your character is just constantly getting away with being a jerk or just doing terrible things in general and never faces any real repercussions, this can irritate your viewers because they know said character will never actually get their comeuppance for the things they've done. Furthermore, without consequences for characters, the audience can lose interest in the story, because eventually the audience realizes your story stakes aren't very high, so there's really nothing to worry about, so what's the point in caring? As writers, we shouldn't shield our characters from consequences all the time. I think that writers go too easy on their characters sometimes. They're able to jump through every obstacle and achieve their goals without facing any real hardship or turmoil, no matter their execution. Thankfully, this is not the case for this show. In fact, in this story, the punishments the writers implement are not simply for viewers' satisfaction or an homage to the gods of karma. There's a method to the writer's madness. It would appear that in this particular series, the writers are using a reward-punishment system. This is a method of discipline, and sometimes writers use it as a tool to force a character to change. Essentially, when a character makes a good choice, the writer moves the character closer towards their goal or reward. And when the character makes a bad choice, the writer's choice of punishment is to move the character further from said goal. This can be seen as poetic justice, if you will. vice is punished and virtue is rewarded, or the idea that people's acts will meet its appropriate reward or punishment. Every story is defined by what the character wants. What's their goal? And it seems that almost every time Devi makes a bad choice, she moves further from her goal instead of closer. Like for instance, in season 1, her goal was to get with Paxton Yoshida Hall, which she believes will rebrand her image at school and increase her status. But unfortunately for Devi, things don't go according to plan with Paxton, and so she chooses to lie to her friends about the status of her relationship with him. Why she would expect her wide-mouthed friends to keep quiet about this shocking revelation is beyond me. But this information spreads throughout the school, eventually making it back to Paxton. Finding out Devi lied on him for her own personal gain pisses him off. This causes major tension between Devi and Paxton, and their relationship is actually worse now than it was back when she was about as relevant to him as a cardboard box on the side of the road. This only pushes Paxton even further away from Devi, in other words, further from her goal. Or another example, Devi making the choice to date 2 guys at once because Paxton is her dream boy, but oddly enough, she realizes she has feelings for Ben. Her goal was to have a good time with both guys until she leaves for India, but they quickly find out about one another, a little too quickly in my opinion. But anyways, the boys are both pissed and obviously humiliated, which leaves Devi boyfriendless, without Paxton or Ben. Again, only further from her goal than she was before. This method essentially forces the character to eventually see that his or her past behaviors, mindsets, and choices are clearly not effective and that they'll have to shift gears or choose a different route. Now, let's be real. Clearly, Devi has a harder skull than most, because even as she's constantly facing consequences for her actions, she still struggles to learn from them. However, this causes her to have to reevaluate her life choices, thus creating opportunity for development. And as you'll notice, when Devi makes the right choices, her punishments dwindle down and her rewards become greater. Except as Devi is growing, her original goals are now changing. The things she originally thought she needed to achieve happiness are now different or not as important to her, like her academic career, her dream college, or dream boyfriend. I mean, for instance, if season 1 Devi had the opportunity to go to Shrubland, a school for competitive students who are academically gifted, a place where she would finally fit in, also having to leave her family behind, especially her mother, she wouldn't have given it a second thought. But season 3 Devi makes the choice not to go to Shrubland after realizing that she already fits in exactly where she is. And as she's finally building a healthy relationship with her mother, she realizes she wants the opportunity to create more memories with her mother and the other people she loves back at home. And although Paxton breaking up with her caused her a great deal of turmoil, she didn't fly off the handle like she usually does. She dealt with the pain, again in stages, and eventually moved on. This all actually led her to the conclusion that Paxton was simply a dream for her and never the ultimate goal. Her goals have now been redefined by the person that she is today. She's now slowly but surely realizing who and what is truly important to her, and because of that, things in her life are now slowly falling into place. And that is Devi's ultimate reward. Now, obviously, Devi's by no means the perfect character, and hopefully she never will be, because nobody wants to watch a show about Barbie Millicent Roberts, or I mean, a Mary Sue. She still has a ways to go in terms of personal development, and hopefully we'll see more of that in season 4. But if you look back on Devi in prior seasons versus now, it's pretty obvious she's had substantial growth and not nearly as unlikable as she was before. And the best way to bring this character's arc to a close is for the writers to make sure this development remains on an upward slope. And considering they've done pretty well with the story thus far, I have no doubt that they will. Speaking of things coming to a close, I think it's such a wise decision to end this show after season 4. I feel like if we were to get like 6-7 seasons of this show, the entire thing would just become repetitive, stale, and pretty boring. Unlike some writers, you can tell that Mindy Kaling, one of the show's executive producers and creator, isn't motivated by money when it comes to her art. She's genuinely trying to tell a uniquely crafted story, which is why instead of turning the page and racking her brain for whatever else she can jam into more seasons, she's ready to share the last chapter of this story and then close the book. So what are your thoughts on Devi's character development? Are you good with how it's going, or do you still find her to be an unlikable, selfish brat and wish her nothing but pain and misery for the rest of the show? And is anyone else feeling bittersweet about this show ending? Yes, I'm happy the story seems to be wrapping up in good timing, but it's so hard to find quality shows these days, so when you find one that's worth watching, you kind of want to hold on to it for as long as possible, you know? But I digress. Feel free to share your own thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Alright, see ya. This method essentially forces the character to eventually see that his or her past behaviors, mindsets, choices are clearly not effective and that they'll have to shift gear. Shut up. This method essentially